Most evil criminals' reaction in court. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, spectators, and victims' families sat in tense silence, waiting for the judge to enter. At the center of it all sat some of the most notorious criminals the world had ever seen, men and women whose crimes had shocked entire nations. Their reactions to their sentencing would be remembered forever. The first was Arthur Gray, a serial killer who had evaded police for over a decade. He had stalked his victims with meticulous precision, leaving behind cryptic messages at every crime scene. Throughout the trial, he had shown no remorse, often smirking when gruesome details were mentioned. But today, as the judge declared, "You are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole," the smirk disappeared. His jaw clenched, and his fingers dug into the wooden bench. For the first time, his cold, calculating demeanor cracked. He stood up abruptly, shouting, "You can't do this. You have no idea what you're doing." The bailiffs rushed in, forcing him back into his seat as he trembled with rage. Next was Linda Reeves, a woman who had poisoned her wealthy husbands one after another, making millions in the process. Throughout the trial, she had presented herself as a composed, elegant widow, claiming innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against her. But as the judge's words echoed through the courtroom, "You will spend the rest of your life behind bars," her mask shattered. Her face contorted in disbelief. No, this isn't happening," she whispered, gripping the table so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her lawyers tried to calm her, but her breathing became erratic, and she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Then came Victor Hale, a ruthless gang leader responsible for countless murders, drug trafficking, and organized crime. He had sat through the trial with an air of arrogance, even winking at witnesses who testified against him. But when the death penalty was pronounced, his confidence wavered. His cocky smirk faded, replaced by a look of stunned silence. He swallowed hard, his hands gripping the chains around his wrists. For the first time in his life, he was powerless. As the guards led him away, he turned to his lawyer and whispered, "There has to be a way out of this, find it." Among the criminals was also a young man named Daniel Pierce. Unlike the others, he wasn't a mastermind or a career criminal. He had committed a brutal crime in a moment of uncontrollable rage. Throughout the trial, he had shown genuine remorse, his eyes often filled with regret. When the judge handed down his sentence, 40 years in prison, he simply nodded. There was no outburst, no denial. Instead, he turned to the victims' families and whispered, "I'm sorry." Tears streamed down his face as he was led away, a broken man who knew he could never undo what he had done. The courtroom remained heavy with emotion as one by one, the criminals were sentenced. Some screamed in anger, others wept in despair, and a few simply sat in stunned silence. Justice had been served, but the weight of their crimes would never fade. The gavel struck, and the courtroom emptied, leaving behind echoes of punishment, regret, and the finality of fate.